Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're connecting from. My name is Joseph Adigbo. I'm with the Facebook Connectivity Partnerships team. Today, I'll take you through a Telegraph overview presentation. And Telegraph is an initiative championed by Facebook. It's a wireless multi-gigabyte technology that's helping to solve last mile connectivity challenges around the globe. Next slide for us to look at the agenda. We'll break this session into two sessions. I'll take you through the Telegraph overview session. And then next, there'll be a panel discussion. My colleague, JP Shaib, who's head of regional partnerships in region, will host two panelists, Shimon Hoshbaum, who's a VP for product line management at Siklu, and also Anthony Holmes, who's VP for millimeter wave product in Cambium. So that's briefly how we'll take you through the two sessions. Next slide, please. So within Facebook, we have an organization called Facebook Connectivity, and our mission broadly is to connect more people to the internet to bring the world closer. The reason why we do this is because today the internet is no longer a convenience. It's a necessity for people to thrive. It's also good for many industries that we've seen during this COVID era, including Facebook. The way we are trying to do this is to bring the whole ecosystem in telecom together, working with partners around the world to drive innovation in the industry and also success. Next slide, please. So for Telegraph itself, the reason why Facebook decided to champion this initiative was three reasons. One was around the world, we are seeing access to high-speed broadband connectivity being limited, and the main limitation is coming from poor last-mile connections. And also, we've realized that fiber is cost prohibitive wherever you go in the world, and the pace at which fiber is being deployed is quite slow. And all of us know the reasons why this is slow. It's because you have to actually dig. And then also after you've done the digging, or before you've done the digging, you have to get right of way to dig, which can take a long time with many municipalities and local authorities. The third reason why Facebook decided to go into this is also we've seen the need for backhaul connectivity for 4G and 5G densification. So with all these really strong reasons, Facebook decided to champion the initiative called Telegraph. Next slide. So Telegraph itself, in a nutshell, I spoke about this. This is a multi-node wireless mesh technology with a couple of components and a lot of benefits for operator partners. One is Telegraph relies on the unlicensed spectrum, 60 gigahertz. Depending on the jurisdiction you are in, most parts of Europe and America, this is license free. So it's very easy to get access to that spectrum. Two is also the high speeds that we're seeing when you deploy Telegraph. So we're in the gigabyte economy. You're seeing multi-gigabyte speeds on Telegraph links. Depending on the OEM vendor you go with, you are guaranteed to get gigabyte speeds on uplinks and downlink connections. And then thirdly is also within Telegraph, we built in a resilient mesh. So depending on the environment that you deploy Telegraph, you'll suffer from some environmental conditions such as trees blocking the millimeter wave solution or moving objects that can obstruct that wave. So we built in a resilient mesh to allow you to reroute the traffic and to keep the SLAs well above what the industry standards requires to be. And then finally is the low cost of deploying Telegraph. So if you compare Telegraph to, for example, digging fiber, there's a significantly lower cost and then also a faster time to market. So with all these in the nutshell as what Telegraph delivers, the key partner benefits, and I'll mention only two of them here, is a rapid and simplified deployment of the Telegraph network. We're talking a matter of weeks here when you want to deploy the network rather than for months when you're doing a traditional network. And then also the lower cost of total ownership. So lower TCOs versus the traditional technologies. In the nutshell, Telegraph itself today, what Facebook is looking to do is to create an ecosystem where we can serve underconnected communities. Next slide. So I want to, on this slide, just emphasize Facebook's role within Telegraph so that I'll give you some more context on how Facebook operates within the Telegraph ecosystem. Telegraph is a Facebook-driven initiative to provide low-cost, high-capacity, point-to-point, point-to-multi-point radios within 60 gigahertz spectrum. Now, Facebook's direct contribution includes one, we provide the meshing algorithm for robust meshing applications. So OEMs can pick up this algorithm. They don't need to build it themselves, and then they can incorporate it into their hardware. Two is we supported the development of a reference design to reduce the total time to market and also the cost to market for the equipment coming into market. So essentially accelerating the rate at which the equipment comes to market from OEMs. The third thing we also did was we demonstrated the technology by supporting trials with different prototypes that we had built in the beginning, just to show and validate the technology. And then fourthly, also, we supported the development of the chipsets, which we continue to do today, to make sure that we can reduce the cost of materials. And then we work with the standard organizations to make sure that all the things that are equipment that are produced today comply by those standards. So IEE with 802.AY built into the chipset configurations, Wi-Fi Alliance to make sure that the equipment that comes out are also compliant per the standards that have been set there. We do work with regulators around the globe. Our policy teams are actively working with regulators to make sure that we support the harmonized spectrum and licensing conditions. And then finally, also accelerating type approvals by providing the necessary information to the different regulatory bodies. The last thing that we do within the ecosystem also is to offer selected OEMs access to our planning tools. So if you're an operator who reaches out to them, they will likely use our planning tools to help to plan out the network and make sure that you can move faster. Just to re-emphasize, Facebook is not part of the value chain when it comes to operators working with OEMs. So we don't get involved. We don't get involved in terms of pricing of the equipment. OEMs are free to do this themselves. We also don't derive any revenue from Telegraph. We've made this technology available to them. We don't see any revenue coming from it. And this is our contribution to make sure that we can connect more people to the internet. Next slide, please. With regards to the applications or use cases today that Telegraph is being leveraged for, we are seeing 4 key use cases. One is on fixed wireless access. So with fixed wireless access, you're seeing, for example, in the picture on the right, the rooftop assets or street level assets being leveraged to host Telegraph gear, where we're having connections going into single family homes, multi-dwelling units, and enterprises. 2 is on mobile backhaul. So we know capacity augmentation and cell site densification for mobility is key. Telegraph equipment can be used to provide this necessary densification for these sites. A third thing that Telegraph is being used for is outdoor Wi-Fi. So outdoor Wi-Fi, we're using street level assets to provide that mesh distribution backhaul to provide the Wi-Fi service. Finally, on the smart city deployments, Telegraph is being leveraged as that connectivity layer to connect smart assets that are being deployed in smart city services. My colleagues in the next session, panel session, will go into a lot more of these use cases so that you will understand further how the use cases are working around the globe. Next slide, please. On this slide, we're showing you today the equipment that is available from different OEMs. So if you're interested as an operator or as a stakeholder, you can contact any one of these OEMs, and then they'll provide you with specifications and also pricing and help you out with how you can plan out your Telegraph network. Next slide. Our final slide today just speaks about where we are in terms of trials. Telegraph is gaining a lot of traction. We are seeing it being deployed. We have over 100 plus trials going on in pilot deployments across different continents today. We are looking to see some of that action also happen in sub-Saharan Africa. And with that, we are having conversations, our policy teams with different regulators on how they can make it easy or reduce the barriers to adoption of Telegraph around the world. So with this, I hope you do have a very good understanding of where we are with Telegraph, how Facebook is supporting the initiative, and how we're also supporting different OEMs to make Telegraph a reality around the globe. I will then hand it back to the panel discussion, which will be led by JP and also with Shimon and also Anthony from Cambium. Over to you, JP.
Thank you, Joseph. Welcome, Shimon and Anthony. As a matter of a quick intro first, we've heard from Joseph about the promise of Telegraph, an exciting technology because of the promise of low cost, low OPEX, since we're working in an unlicensed band, high bandwidth and meshing capabilities, and we'll probably hear more. Of course, it's also in very high frequency, so it's relatively short range and line of sight. So we should make sure we're cognizant of that. But what is exciting, I would like to add on Telegraph is I've been working on Telegraph for about 2 years, and something really like game changing happened this year, about 9 months ago, is that equipment finally came to the market. Before that, Facebook was the promoter of the technology, like Joseph said. We had prototypes, we did trials, we tried to make sure the technology was tested, and regulators in some parts of the world were aware of it. But their whole objective now is to get this unleashed to the market and see how equipment manufacturers take over the technology, make it their own. And what I find quite exciting is that every OEM has taken ownership of technology in a different way, based on the use cases, on their own identity, on their own DNA, if I could say, and implement it sometimes in ways we hadn't even envisaged as Facebook. And I'm particularly delighted to have here Cambium Networks and Ciclu, who are arguably the two OEMs that have been, let's say, who jumped on the boat a bit earlier, and have come up with what we call GA, general availability of equipment, and are currently selling Telegraph equipment in the world. So thank you both, Shimon and Anthony, for being here. And my first questions will go to Shimon. You are in product line management at Ciclu, the VP. And you're one of the key OEMs serving particularly the African market, right? Obviously, every OEM have their own footprint. What do you see in millimeter wave technology, and in particular in Telegraph, that make it interesting for stakeholders in sub-Saharan Africa? And what are the use cases that you see for Telegraph-like technologies?
Hi, JP, and hello, everybody. Pleasure to be part of this session. I think what is very interesting with millimeter wave, and we've been at millimeter wave for more than 10 years now at Ciclu, is that it's anything that you can do with fiber, you can basically do with millimeter wave, except you can do it a lot faster. The time to market is incomparable. You deploy links in a day, sometime overnight. The learning curve to deploy millimeter wave, is the way we are developing our equipment, is very easy. We have been, in the last year, everybody has been exploring with remote working. We've been exploring also with remote working. We have actually brought up a lot of networks online from our offices, wherever we are, in Israel, in Africa, in the US, in England, in Asia. And we have been able to train people literally in a day. As recently as a few weeks ago, we had an experience again where we could train technical staff in near Manila to bring up a network in a day, and they completed their proof of concept. They could demonstrate to the local authority, the municipality, how Telegraph is going to help them deliver internet access to everybody in Quezon City, which is really interesting to see how this can really happen all in a day. But I think, if we step back a moment and look at the benefits of the technology, millimeter wave is like wireless and it's like fiber. Difficult to say what it is really. It's like fiber because it is gigabit performance, very low latency. It's like wireless because you deploy it in a day or in a matter of hours. It's actually a lot easier to deploy millimeter wave than it is to deploy any other wireless technology, because you don't need to do spectrum studies, you don't need to plan for interferences. Millimeter wave links are, generally speaking, very narrow beams, just a few degrees, because and it's very easy to do this whether we use the fantastic scanning antennas that Facebook has built into the Telegraph technology, or with other type of antennas. So once you build these pencil-thin beams, you can basically go anywhere in density. We have today locations in the world where thousands of links are in operation, not all of them supported by Ciclu equipment. There are other providers, but it just goes to show that with the right regulation framework, which doesn't need to be very difficult, it's possible to allow a lot of participants, be it OEM vendors like Cambium, like Ciclo, and others, and a lot of operating parties, service providers, private organizations to deploy millimeter wave links at very high densities, so just like fiber from that point of view, and deliver extremely high capacities wherever it's needed, to a home, to a school, to a hospital, to a street where you want to deploy now all kinds of sensors and cameras to enhance the surveillance of the area and grow the safety of the people walking around, provide Wi-Fi access to everybody. All this is really what millimeter wave in general and what Telegraph in particular allows us to do.
Thank you, Shimon. I'm quite excited to hear that you can get the network up in one day. I'll love to hear more about it. I also liked a lot the Telegraph or millimeter wave being both fiber and radio at the same time. But let me go to you, Anthony. Cambium, is a well-known leader in the area of point-to-multipoint wireless access, among other things. And you were one of the first OEMs to announce equipment availability. So you have now some I would say, runway or experience. Maybe not that long, but it's coming. As Joseph mentioned in his intro, Telegraph is what Facebook provided is a concept reference design. You mentioned some features and the antennas, right, Shimon, as well, that Facebook had designed and made available to OEMs. But then every OEM is implementing their own design. I would like to hear from you, Anthony. How did Cambium make Telegraph their own? And how do you see it complementing or even transforming your current portfolio, your current offering?
Cambium has shipped over 10 million radios in all different frequencies. But we have seen 60 gigahertz. When we launched that, has been one of the fastest growing releases we've ever seen. And tens of thousands of radios shipping in such a short period of time. We always knew that 60 gigahertz was a major opportunity, great opportunity to bridge that digital divide. But we had been waiting for the right technology to come along. And I think that's where the partnership with Facebook and Qualcomm has really been able to enable this. What we have seen is that with frequencies like 5 gig and 3 gigahertz, which is used currently in South Africa, they have different issues. 3 gigahertz in South Africa is very license driven and owned by license operators. 5 gigahertz is unlicensed and unregulated and is a bit of a beast. Everyone is using it and it causes a lot of interference. So, whilst that technology will give you 10 meg, 20 meg, 50 meg megabits per second, you can't breach that gap where with 60 gigahertz, you're going to get, hundreds of megabits per second. You're going to get a gigabit per second. And that's where you're really opening up the opportunity for many applications to be able to utilize that speed. So how do we make it our own? I think this is where we took a look at point-to-point, both short range and long range, having products that could do both at a cost-effective price. That was key. So utilizing the technology, the TDD structure, the beamforming, etc. But then we also then looked at how to make it cost-effective to produce these large, to produce not only point-to-multipoint networks where you have a single hub and spoke, but then to actually do these large distributed networks where you can drop in these DNs, string them along with each other, and be able to communicate and get that network up and running. As Shimon said, it's amazing how quickly these networks can go, and they grow as well. So we have operators around the world who start off, they put a distribution node in. They then, the next day, they put another one in, then another one and another one. And they grow across that area, whether it's residential, whether it's business, whether it's city. And all along, they're then just dropping in, getting customers in to connect to these distribution nodes. It really is the way that the standard has been done it allows you to do this and take advantage of this technology. So it really comes down is Cambium is sort of put together a package which allows you to do this quickly and efficiently and managed along with not this frequency but any of the frequencies that can work together with 60 gigahertz.
Thank you, Anthony. Shimon, maybe you could add a little bit to that from the Ciclo point of view of how you made it your own, and say a little bit about how it applies or how does your product portfolio uniquely, if I could say, matches the needs in sub-Saharan Africa.
So I think we've been working on millimeter wave and in 60 gigahertz. Actually, we are on our fifth generation, if I count correctly, for 60 gigahertz products, because we have realized long time ago that 60 gigahertz with its unique properties of high density links, high capacity, low probability of interference is quite unique piece of spectrum. And fortunately, we saw in different places in the world regulators opening up for use of that standard, and obviously with the work of Facebook now accelerating in the last 2 years or so, opening up for point-to-point and for point-to multi-point everywhere outdoors with very little burden from a regulatory point of view, which really helps the service providers or other organizations understand what they can do. So what we wanted to do when we learned about Facebook efforts around Telegraph, we really wanted to help with our experience working with service providers using already 60 gigahertz or other millimeter wave spectrum as part of the solution, and make sure that our Telegraph would help service providers do business with millimeter wave, with Telegraph, in the same way as they do it today. So they can deploy networks with the same ease, whether they do today any kind of fiber technology, GPON, pure Ethernet, DSL, other wireless technology. They generally do it with very simple layer 2 networks in the last mile. Whether it's a campus network, it's also going to be, again, a layer 2 network. And we've made sure that this is part of what people can do again, so that doesn't matter any kind of service they want to deploy on any technology that they chose or they have available in their toolkit, they can expand over to millimeter wave and do the same. And the end user is not bothered at the end of the day what is the technology that is used by the service provider. We have also made sure that the Telegraph technology is very easy to deploy, whether people want to use with controllers, without controllers, many different aspects that we make it easy for a service provider to integrate the Telegraph solution in their existing practices in the same way that they can offer services. And that really makes it very easy for service providers or for other organizations who don't understand anything at all about wireless, because sometimes the people doing the work, the installation, they know how to do fiber. I myself, I've been in the fiber world up to a few years ago, converted very easily to millimeter wave once I understood the benefits and the ease of doing more with less. And it's really a pleasure to see what the dreams that we had at Ciclo, the dreams that Facebook and Cambium, I'm sure as well, people understand the magic of what can be done with Telegraph and deploy it in their own. Why is that all important in Sub-Sahara, in this region? Because I think there are challenges which combine in the same time. One needs to go relatively long distances, 10, 20, 30, 50 kilometers. And that can be done today with millimeter wave. Not the Telegraph type solution, but the other millimeter wave, which I think is covered in another session that Facebook is also, I could not be there, but I think there is another session relating to the 70 and 80 gigahertz spectrum in millimeter wave and all the benefits that it could bring to this region, making it possible to connect locations which are otherwise unconnected. And yes, everybody's talking about other options. But if you want to deliver gigabit speeds, I think the terrestrial route, one way or another, is the more reliable one. Certainly the one which is available today to everybody who wants to spend a little bit of time to deploy a link of 10 gigabit anywhere you want to bridge the gaps to townships and towns and small pockets of population which have no other access to the internet otherwise. And then we utilize Telegraph to densify the network. So once we have brought this fiber-like capacity anywhere it is required, then Telegraph can step in to do the dense work of reaching every street corner, every school, every hospital, every business, everywhere where you need these capacities again, you can do it very easily with Telegraph. So we think by combining these different tools that we have, we empower service providers or other organizations, sometimes a lot of non-profit organizations as well, to do things that otherwise they could not have been done for the mission that they are set up to achieve.
Thank you, Shimon. I think I'd love to quote you. Doing more with less as a subtitle for Telegraph or millimeter wave or even wireless is a great I would say tagline that will resonate, I think, with a lot of people and a lot of service providers. Anthony,
all other organizations.
Yes, and other
organizations. It's very important to understand that we have lots of partners who are non-profit organizations, so they are not in it to make money. They just have a mission, to connect the unconnected, to serve the underserved, to bridge the digital divide, which we all understand, in 2021, after we are all in one way or another in confinements and lockdowns and isolation, and we realize that internet is not anymore about entertainment or gaming. It's about everything we do every hour of the day. We are doing, you can see from the background of everybody, we are not at work. Everybody's here, working remotely, and we can only do that because we have reliable internet. We all appreciate why it's important, not just for work, not just for entertainment, looking for work, shopping. Our kids are learning over the internet now, and what is more important than access to study, to studying in general.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding us about that, Shimon. I think we should always keep in mind the global picture. And along those lines, Anthony, taking a little bit of a step back, you mentioned Cambium has sold millions, or maybe you said tens of millions of radios. So how do you see the appetite for 60 gigahertz and in general, but Telegraph in particular, across geographies and across use cases? Is it uniform? Are there certain types of use cases or geographies where you see much more of a pull?
I think this is one of these breakthrough technologies that sort of spans. It's very hard to sort of pick a SAM or a TAM. Because you actually can create your own market, you can create your own demand with this, because it is really a construction of blocks that you've been given. The Telegraph standard has been put together allows you to put many aspects of a network together in one place. It can be the simple point-to-point. It can be the simple point-to-multi-point, or it could be a vast network. And this is where the actual usage for it just changes, no matter where you are in the world. And we see this whether or not you're in countries like the US or countries in Africa or Asia. The scales might be different and demands from people might be different, but actually the technology has enabled you all to do similar things. The residential areas. What we're seeing here is in the past, everyone has sort of dealt with fixed wireless accesses. You put a radio up on a mast and you beam down into an area. Now you have the capability actually getting into that street, that residential area place, and distribute that network throughout at street level. So, as Shimon was saying, one of the key things about this, you do not have to be a wireless expert to put it together. The whole point of this is someone who is perhaps done a Wi-Fi AP, being able to deploy that. That is the kind of skill set you need. You don't need to have mast climbers to go up and install this kit. You basically just need a ladder. You put it at that street level, you put it at the house level, and that gives so much more flexibility and speed to actually develop these networks. And this is what we're actually seeing, that and quite rightly, we talk about the demands today of how people need more more data, more access because of COVID, because of working from home, and waiting for fiber to come along, using mobile data plans, etc., only gets you so far. You needed something else. You needed something to be quickly deployed, and this is what we see where cities we're able to deploy in a city. 100 links went up in a week. 2 weeks it took to actually do the actual the network commissioning. But that actually was able to just go from street corner to street corner, putting these devices up. Now that city has Wi-Fi access to anyone that walks down the street. It has fixed wireless access to buildings either side as you go through the city. So, we see that in the smart city. Residential, I'm constantly amazed where, we have networks of hundreds of units where every day, as I mentioned, they actually deploy these. They then are looking, they go to the next rooftop, they go to the next rooftop, and it just grows. And they have networks of hundreds now with plans in their eyes. You can see their minds ticking. They're having networks of thousands, and they've got this capability, and it grows. Using the technology, using the layer 3, the routing, etc. You don't need to know anything about it. Automatically will optimize itself. It can then, from a user premises to how it gets out to the POP, is all done internally using OpenR, the Facebook OpenR standard, the layer 3 routing. The chances of having broadcast storms has been eliminated by using layer 3 rather than layer 2. But it's still simple. Anyone that knows IPv4 can just utilize this, or IPv6. You can get even more advantages. So, lots of different opportunities for people to roll this out very quickly and to be able to fulfill that requirement for people to get data.
Thank you, Anthony. That's also quite exciting. Now, there are lots of opportunities for Telegraph. It meets an unmet need. We've gone through a number of the advantages. I mean, the engineer in me knows that there's no silver bullet to connectivity. You did mention earlier about ranges, right? For example, Telegraph will not be the solution for ranges in the tens of kilometers. You also mentioned, I think, we talked a lot about street poles. We all know, for example, that electricity can be an issue even on city assets in certain parts of the world. I'd like to hear a little bit maybe from you, Shimon. What do you see as the barriers to adoption of technologies such as Telegraph, meaning millimeter wave, short range, with all the benefits we already discussed? What do you see as the barriers to adoption in the markets that you serve?
So I think the main barrier to adoption is really on the regulatory front. Sometimes the region as a whole has adopted, a plan that allows 60 gigahertz to be used in point-to-point, in point-to-multipoint, indoor and outdoor. But then obviously if the national regulator has not adopted the same framework, then everybody is left waiting for that to happen. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm not in this region, but in other regions, we've seen that local regulators are behind the regional target by a year or two, which means that everybody now in that country, in that nation, is left on hold with maybe plans. Do we do it? Do we not do it? and maybe they don't do anything at all because doing wireless in general and telegraph in particular seems so easy that everybody wants to go there and puts other plans on hold with other potential technologies. So it's not a win-win. It's actually loss-loss on all fronts if the regulatory picture is not clear. And I think we have a lot of the audience here, which is certainly interested in this. Please, everybody who can, we can share a lot of our experience working with 60 gigahertz or other millimeter wave spectrum all over the world. What has been done, how it's been regulated, what is working well, what is working less. Facebook has also a breadth of experience that they can share as well, Cambium as well. And I think we are already here to share this information with anybody who wants to understand how they can open up the buyer, that particular aspect of the buyer, as easily as possible for all the parties. And again, it's not just the service provider. There are, as I said earlier, many other organizations that can beneficiate. Municipalities roll out their own networks, which benefit the residents. They provide access to for the schools, for the hospitals, for Wi-Fi, as Anthony was mentioning a moment ago. So everybody benefits, and it's really in the hands of the local regulator to open that flood. And then obviously it's for people to understand that it's not difficult at all to deploy this millimeter wave Telegraph technology. We are sharing wherever we can with our own results. We provide equipment for people to test and appreciate how far they can go, how fast we can go, how much capacity we can deliver, how reliable this technology is. Rain or shine, it holds on very well to many different aspects of the weather, unlike other bands. It can be engineered like any other network, which is really important if you want, because now you can build reliability in your network with mesh and with other aspects. And then we also provide some what we call a cookbook, which is basically an assembly of all the best practices that we have seen from different types of organizations on how to utilize these products, the ones from Ciclu in 60 gigahertz, in 70 and 80 gigahertz as well, to come up with a complete solution. And all this is baked into a planning tool that we also make available to everybody who is interested, so that they can really kind of see with their own eyes what it will really take to cover, to solve a certain problem, whether they want to cover, like a port area, a campus, a university, they want to reach to this and those locations, then these planning tools are the best thing that we have, that because you can in minute visualize a solution, understand how much time, how much money it's going to take, and what's going to be the end result for the people getting the service, whether it's a telegraph point on your home, or it's a Wi-Fi backhaul, or it's something which connects a library. You can see, can you do it with one shot? Do you need more than one shot to get there? It's very easy. You can visualize that later on Google Earth or Google Map, and people understand very quickly how far and how fast in terms of gigabits, they can deliver utilizing all these tools that we make available for everybody who is interested.
Thank you, Shimon. Anthony, would you concur that one of the main blockers of or let's say bottlenecks in deploying at larger scale is regulatory? And what would you see as in those countries where the spectrum is not yet, let's say, unlicensed or not unlicensed? What do you see as steps a regulator could take to make it unlicensed? So what have you seen as successful milestones for this to happen?
Okay. As an equipment provider, it's often tough to us to see, well, where is the blockage going up the band? It's there, it should be used, why can't it be? But, it is one of the most valuable natural resources a country has, or a region has, spectrum. And so therefore it needs careful management. What we do know is this band, especially, I know sub-Sahara is different regions, but for example, like South Africa, we know that this is already available for point-to-point, at higher power, at 55 dBm EIRP. So we know that it can be utilized. Now, what Telegraph has provided is the capability to allow radios to work in dense environments, synced through GPS, powered a lot less than 55 dBm, using the standard, using using automatic transmit power control. You only need to use the power you need to connect to get that link up. So, as far as utilizing the spectrum sensibly and reliably and carefully, the standard is taking care of all that. The antennas that we're using, as was mentioned before, the beamforming on there produces these pencil-thin beams, which enable the DNs and CNs to talk to each other. So in theory, you're creating multiple point-to-point links going back to that DN. So Facebook and the standard and Ciclu, Cambium, we've all worked together to make sure that we can utilize the spectrum cleanly and efficiently. So basically to open up this is going to be able to provide gigabit services, rapid deployment, compared to fiber to the home or even mobile data plans at these rates. It is a cost-effective way of getting data to the masses and opening up many opportunities throughout a region or a country. So we are looking forward to working and supporting the regulators, there's no doubt about that, on how we can use this spectrum. And we will work within any framework that is published post any public consultation. So we await to see what happens.
Thank you, Anthony. In the interest of time, there are a couple of questions from the audience. I'll take the liberty of addressing a couple, and then I'll let you, Shimon and Anthony, answer the last one, and maybe complement the answers I'll have given. A number of the questions are around the regulation part, actually. About one question is, what is the process of getting licenses and permissions for siting equipment within cities? And I think here the answer is, well, it depends on the national regulator. In some countries, there's nothing as long as the equipment is type approved and compliant with the local regulation. This is the case in most of the CEPT countries, even if in some cases, as I think Shimon mentioned, the EU, for example, issued a directive, and not every country has made it national law, so there might be a little bit of delay. But eventually, every country will follow the EU directive, which comes from the CEPT recommendation, and then it's absolutely nothing to be done. In other countries, there's a very light licensing in the sense that you pay one fee for a whole year, which is just a token fee, like $50 equivalent or something, and the operator is supposed to keep a track of where they have deployed equipment in case there is any complaints for interference. And that goes to what you said, I think also Shimon and both Anthony, right? Regulators care about interference. Maybe in some cases lost revenue, but let's not get into that in the interest of time here. And interference is mitigated already by the frequency, by the pencil beaming, and by all the technological features that you've mentioned. And we have the experience as well to do that. And I think here both the OEMs around this table and Facebook would be delighted to work with any regulatory body to share our experiences both in the field and with regulators. I'm told that we need to wrap up. There was a questions about the speeds that are achievable with Telegraph. Hopefully we can provide this async, or maybe the audience can reach out directly to us. But definitely it's in the many gigabits per second, and it will increase in the future with features such as channel bonding that will come up towards the end of the year. So there's a path for even more capacity coming from Telegraph. Thank you, Shimon. Thank you, Anthony. It's been entertaining. I learned stuff, so I hope the audience also all learned stuff. And I've also gathered a couple of reusable quotes from you. Thank you both.
Thank you, JP. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, everybody.